In this video, we will show you how to replace your vehicle speed sensor wire connector on this Honda Accord. This will be located along the top rear of your transmission. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The location is just underneath our air intake system here, so we're going to remove that. We'll follow it to the upper air filter housing. To remove this, you'll find that it has 4 bolts, but to gain access to one of them, you're going to lift this up and out of position. Now we can start removing those 8mm headed mounting bolts holding this in place. Let's follow the air intake. We'll dislodge the cable from this area. Just pop it right out of place. Lift that. We'll lift up on this wiring harness as well. If you were to look just behind this area, you're going to find a small Phillips headed clamp. You can see a little bit of it here. Just go ahead and use a Phillips head screwdriver to loosen this just enough that we can slide this out of place. Now, as we start pulling this away, it's going to give us slack in this area. We'll squeeze the clamp and slide this out of place. Use some pliers for this. We'll hold that, slide that out of place. Remove the clamp from the area so you don't drop it. Slide this out of place. Just give it a quick inspection and set it aside. Now, since we have the air filter housing opened up, it's important to make sure that you remove and inspect the air filter. If it needs to be replaced, go ahead and replace it with a new one. Now we have a clear view down inside this area. If you were to look down here, you're going to find your vehicle speed sensor and the wiring connector. Let's start disconnecting the connector from that vehicle speed sensor. Go ahead and squeeze on the locking tab and pull it up and out of place. Once you have that disconnected, you always want to look at both ends and make sure you do not see any corrosion. Now that we have that disconnected, I'm just going to reach under here and I'll pull it up to a position that we can gain access to the wiring. Now, commonly on this, you're going to find that you have wire sheathing that's protecting the wires for you. Go ahead and trim some of that out of the way. We do need to start cutting the wires, and when we do that, we're going to make sure we do each one of them one at a time. I don't need to go too far back here. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to cut each one of these wires one at a time. You never want to cut all of the wires at the same time. You can cause an issue. Since we're replacing the connector here, we'll go ahead and trim this. We don't need to leave very much wire close to the connector. We're starting with the black wire here. Once you do have that trimmed, the next thing that you need to do is remove some of the sheathing from this. We have to make sure we have enough of the sheathing removed that we can use our specialty connectors. This is going to be a little bit difficult to see, getting my hands in here. There we are. Let's just go ahead and give that a little twist. Now you'll find with your kit, it came with some heat shrinkable connectors here. What we need to do is carefully slide the wire in as far as we can. The wiring itself should make its way towards the center. You'd want to crimp that down on the side that has the wire. And then afterward, when you're all done, you want to use some heat to shrink this down up against the wire, keeping moisture away. Make sure I'm holding pressure on this while we continue. Careful not to cut any other wires while I'm doing so here. Let's give this a little tug, make sure it's secured. Now let's continue doing the same thing to each and every one of these wires. Squeezed on there. There we go. We'll give that a tug. At this point, I have all 3 of these done. Let's continue on with the connector itself now. We're going to repeat the process for each one of these wires. Just do the same to each one of these wires. The next thing we need to do is compare the original connector to the brand new one. When doing this, you want to ensure that you connect each one of the wires in the proper placement. That's why we left a little bit on the original connector here, so we can see exactly which wire's which. Now, if you were to look at where the lock is on these connectors, that's how we're going to match this up. Starting with the black wire, we're going to go black to black. We'll squeeze it in. Once we're sure that that's connected, move along to the center wire and then the outward wire there. Slide the wire right in there. We'll crimp it down. When you go to crimp this, you want to ensure that you do not cut any of the other wiring. This is extremely important. Before we move along, we're going to give this a nice tug to ensure that it's properly secured together. Continue on with your other 2 wires. As I mentioned, make sure they're in the proper order. Okay, got all 3 of these wires on here. Now, as I mentioned before, it's important to make sure that you apply some heat along the areas of the connectors themselves that are supposed to shrink down. That's the areas that the wires slide into. You want to be careful doing this. We don't want to melt anything else. You can see that shrinking down. Now it's your prerogative. If you want to take a gloved hand and try to squeeze this down, use caution, it can be hot. Do the same to the other side there. Quick squeeze. Do the same to all. Once everything's connected as it should be, we'll continue on with some electrical tape. Make sure this is tied up so it can't get caught or damaged on anything. Start down near the bottom. Make our way up. All right, that's pretty good. Bring that back down there. Let's connect in that connector now. Press it in, listen for a click, give it a little tug to make sure it's completely secure. That feels good. Now it's time for the air intake system. Let's start with the air filter. Make sure that's placed in properly. We'll continue on with the upper air filter box and the air intake leading all the way over to that throttle body. Lift up on this cable. This will slide down and underneath this cable. Align this area with your throttle body here. We'll press it in as far as possible. Before you tighten this clamp, we'll pause here and make our way all the way over to the upper air filter housing. We'll get this in place, spring it right down. At this point, you want to make sure you tighten all 4 of your 8mm headed mounting bolts, holding this in place. we'll get this in place. It's going to slide right down along the front here. Now, if you were to look under this area, you're going to find where your battery wire needs to sit. We'll make sure that's secured. Now we'll make our way this way. We're going to secure our cable. Should slide right on there. When we go to put this tube in place, we'll make sure that we do have our clamp as well. Slide that right into the hose as far as possible. Reinstall the clamp into the original position. Let's make our way to this clamp. We're going to tighten this up while we can still gain access. Use our Phillips head for this, of course. Once you feel as though you have that tight, give it a tug, make sure it's secure. Now it's time for our wiring and our hoses here. We'll take that wire, slide it down into position. There it is. Same thing with the hose. Tight fit. Okay, friend, we finished the installation. At this point, you want to hop in the passenger compartment, start up your vehicle, let it run for a little while. Make sure you have no check engine light and no running condition, and then take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.